morning after my daughter's anniversary dinner, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my lawyer's office on Wellington Street and stared at my hands for a long time. They're not pretty hands. They never were. 63 years of living will do that. The knuckles a little swollen now, a scar on my left thumb from a paring knife when I was 22. The kind of hands that have scrubbed floors and signed checks and held a baby alone in a hospital room at 2 in the morning with no one else there. My lawyer, a careful man named Geoffrey, came out to the parking lot himself when his receptionist told him I'd been sitting there for 20 minutes. He knocked on the passenger window. I unlocked the door. He got in, briefcase on his lap, and looked at me the way people look at someone they're not sure about. "Sylvia," he said. "What happened?" I told him. "All of it." And when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. And then he said, "Are you absolutely certain?" I told him I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. I should back up. I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario, the second to 4 kids, in a house where the furnace quit every February and we ate a lot of macaroni and not much else. My father worked at the mine. My mother worked everywhere, cleaning houses, taking in ironing, selling Avon out of a plastic bag she carried on the bus. She never complained. That was the thing about her. She just did what needed doing, and she sang while she did it, which used to embarrass me when I was a teenager and now is one of the things I miss most about her. I left Sudbury at 19 to come to Toronto. I had $200 and a suitcase and a letter of acceptance to nursing school that I'd applied for without telling anyone because I wasn't sure I'd get in, and I didn't want to have to explain if I didn't. I got in. I worked as a nurse for 26 years. Emerge, mostly. You see everything in Emerge. Every kind of person, every kind of circumstance. You learn very quickly that the man in the expensive suit and the man who hasn't had a bath in a week are both terrified when they're sick, and they both need the same things from you: to be seen and to be told the truth, and to know that the person next to them actually cares what happens to them. I cared. I always cared too much, probably. It's not always an asset. I was married for 8 years to a man I'll call my ex-husband, which is generous, because what I should call him is the reason I learned to be very careful about who I trust. We had 1 daughter together. He left when she was 3. I won't spend more time on him than that because he doesn't deserve it. So it was just us, my daughter and me, in a rented duplex in Scarborough, then a slightly better apartment in East York. Then, when she was 7 and I'd been working doubles for 2 years and putting every extra dollar away, a small semi-detached house on a quiet street in Leslieville that I bought for myself, by myself, with no one's help. I remember standing in that empty house the first night after the movers left and my daughter was asleep on a mattress on the floor of her room with her stuffed rabbit. I walked through every room and I touched the walls. Mine, I thought. No one can take this from us. That was my first property. It was not my last. I need to explain something about how I think about money, because it matters for the rest of this story. I don't spend what I don't have to spend. I never have. Not because I'm miserly. I like a good meal, and I've been known to buy an expensive coat, but because I grew up watching my mother count quarters on the kitchen table, and that does something to you. It makes you very clear-eyed about the difference between what you want and what you need. When I bought that house in Leslieville, I realized a few things. I realized that the mortgage payment was actually less than what I'd been paying in rent. I realized that my neighbors across the street, a couple who'd bought their house in the 80s, had just sold it for 11 times what they paid. And I realized, in the way you sometimes realize things that are obvious only after someone shows you, that property in Toronto was not just a place to live, it was a mechanism. So I started paying attention. I read everything I could find. I talked to people who knew more than I did. I made mistakes early. A condo in a building that turned out to have serious structural issues, a partnership I got out of just in time, and I learned from every one of them. Over the next 20 years, quietly, without advertising it, I acquired 11 properties across the Greater Toronto area. Nothing flashy. Older houses in neighborhoods that were changing. Duplexes, a small apartment building in Hamilton. I renovated them myself when I could, hired good people when I couldn't, and rented them to tenants I vetted carefully. I kept working as a nurse until I was 54 because I loved the work and because I didn't want to be one of those people who stops having a purpose. When I retired, it was because my knees made it hard to be on my feet for 12 hours, not because I had to. My daughter thought I lived on my pension and whatever I'd saved from nursing. I let her think that. Not because I was hiding anything malicious, I wasn't. But I'd watched too many families get complicated around money, and I wanted her to love me for who I was, not for what I had. I wanted her to build her own life because she wanted to, not because she was waiting. She did build her own life. I'm proud of that. She finished her MBA, got a good job at a tech company downtown, met a man named, well, I'll call him my son-in-law, at a conference in Vancouver. He seems fine. He's polite to me. He remembers to ask how I'm doing. I don't think he thinks about me very much, which is different from disliking me, but it's not the same as warmth. His family, though. His family is another matter. His mother, I'll call her the woman across the table, because that's what she always felt like, is the kind of person who has never had to wonder where the money would come from. Her husband, who died 4 years ago, built a successful commercial real estate company in Oakville. She inherited everything, sits on 3 charity boards, and has the particular confidence of someone who has never been told no by anything other than a waiting list. She is not unkind, exactly. She's something worse than unkind. Exactly. She's something worse than unkind. She's dismissive. The first time I met her, at a dinner my daughter organized at a restaurant on King Street West, she shook my hand and said, "Oh, a nurse. How wonderful. I always admire people who can do that sort of thing." The way you'd admire someone for being able to change a tire. Useful, not something you'd do yourself. I smiled and said thank you and spent the rest of the dinner being pleasant, because that's what I do. I'm good at pleasant. I've been pleasant through things that would make your hair stand up. Over the next year and a half, there were more dinners, a Christmas gathering at their house in Oakville, a large house, beautifully decorated, the kind of house that is meant to tell you something about the people who live in it, and various other occasions at which I was perfectly nice and she was perfectly nice, and we both knew exactly what the other person thought. What she thought was, my son married well, but his mother-in-law is a retired nurse from Scarborough with no money and no consequence, and we'll all just be polite about it. What I thought was, I'm going to stay out of it and let my daughter be happy, and that's all that matters. And then came the anniversary dinner. My daughter and her husband's first anniversary fell on a Saturday in September. His family organized a dinner at their house. 14 people. Catered. A local company brought in the food, and a young woman in a white shirt served wine and cleared plates. I drove down from the city. I had a gift for my daughter, a wooden box about the size of a shoebox that I'd made myself from a piece of walnut I'd had for years. Inside the box were letters, 41 letters, one for every birthday my daughter had had since the day she was born, handwritten by me, sealed in individual envelopes with her age written on the outside. I'd started writing them the year she was born, sitting up in the night when she was nursing, my hand moving across the paper while she slept against my shoulder. I wrote about what she was like, what made her laugh, what I hoped for her. I wrote every year without fail. I had never given them to her before because I always thought, not yet, she's not ready, I'm not ready. Her first anniversary seemed right. A marriage is a beginning, and I wanted her to know where she came from. I refinished the box myself, sanded it until it was smooth as skin, put a small brass latch on it. My daughter's initials were carved into the lid. Not by me, I'm not that skilled, by a man in Kensington Market who does beautiful work and charged me $60, which was the right price for something that mattered. I brought it in, wrapped in brown paper with a ribbon, nothing elaborate. We had drinks first on the back terrace. His mother moved through the group with the ease of someone hosting, touching elbows, laughing at the right moments. She greeted me with a smile and said, "Sylvia, so glad you could come," in the voice that means I'm checking this off. We sat down to dinner. His family on one side, my daughter and her husband at the heads, me near the end next to a pleasant man who turned out to be the husband's uncle, who told me about his hobby growing heritage tomatoes in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I genuinely enjoyed that part. When dessert came, my daughter opened gifts. There were envelopes, gift cards, checks, a trip to a spa in Muskoka from his parents, and a few wrapped boxes. Mine was last. She untied the ribbon, peeled back the brown paper, and when she saw the walnut box, she made a small sound, quiet, and looked at me. "Open the latch," I said. She opened it. She saw the envelopes. She understood immediately what they were, because she knows me, and her eyes went bright. His mother leaned over from 2 seats away to see what the fuss was about. "What is it?" she asked. My daughter started to explain, but before she'd finished, his mother had already settled back in her chair with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh," she said, "little letters." She tilted her head slightly and said it to the woman beside her, not quite quietly enough, like a box of notes from a pen pal. "Isn't that sweet?" The table didn't go silent. That would have been dramatic. It just continued. People kept talking. The woman beside his mother laughed politely. My daughter's face changed for just a moment, then she smoothed it out. Her husband looked at his wine glass. He looked at his wine glass. I watched him and I waited. The way you wait when you know someone is about to say something, and then I understood that he wasn't going to say anything. He was going to keep looking at his wine glass until the moment passed, and then it would be over, and we would all continue with dessert. I set my napkin on the table. I pushed my chair back. "I need some air," I said, very calmly. Not in the way where you're shaking and trying to hide it, actually calmly, because something had settled in me in that moment, the way things settle when you've been carrying something for a long time and you finally put it down. I got my coat from the front hall. I let myself out the front door. I stood on the driveway in the September dark and I breathed. I drove home. I didn't cry on the way home. I listened to the radio, CBC, a program about the history of the Hudson's Bay Company that I'd been meaning to catch. I took the 401 to the DVP, then across to my house. I put the kettle on. I sat at my kitchen table with my tea and I thought. Not about what she said. That part wasn't complicated. Some people are like that. They see the surface of something and they can't imagine there might be depth underneath. She looked at me and she saw a retired nurse from Scarborough who brought a wooden box of letters to a dinner in Oakville, and she thought pen pal. I thought about my daughter's face, the way she smoothed it over. The way she's had to do that, I realized, probably many times in that house, at that table, and she never told me. Which means she was protecting either me or herself, and I couldn't be sure which. I thought about my son-in-law, his wine glass. That was the thing I couldn't move past. The wine glass. I called my daughter the next morning. She answered on the second ring. "Mom," she said, and then, quietly, "I'm sorry." "You don't need to apologize for other people," I said. "I should have said something." "Yes," I said, "you should have." We were quiet for a moment. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. "And then I have some things I need to take care of this week. We'll talk properly soon." I called Geoffrey's office when it opened at 9. Geoffrey has been my lawyer for 15 years. He did the closing on my third property, and I've used him for everything since. He's in his late 50s, methodical, never dramatic. He keeps a little tin of cough drops in his desk drawer, and he's never once offered me one, which for some reason I find trustworthy. He came out to the parking lot and got in my car and listened to everything. When I finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to update my documents," I said. "Everything. Tell me specifically." I told him specifically. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Sylvia, I want to make sure you've thought this through. This isn't a small change." "I know it isn't. My daughter isn't being removed from anything," I said. "I want to be clear about that. This is about the structure and about my intentions, and I want them reflected accurately." He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Come upstairs." Here is what I had at that point in time: 11 properties, the majority of them in the Greater Toronto Area, with one in Hamilton and one in Kingston. Combined assessed value as of the previous spring of approximately $4.3 million. Rental income across the portfolio running at just over $28,000 a month. An investment portfolio managed by a firm on Bay Street that I've worked with for 12 years. A house I own outright in Leslieville that I have lived in for 27 years. I am not telling you this to impress you. I am telling you so that you understand what I mean when I say that when she leaned over at that dinner table and said, like a box of notes from a pen pal, she did not know who she was talking about. She had looked at me, my sensible coat, my practical shoes, my retired nurse life, and she had filled in the rest herself. People do this. It is their great mistake. What Geoffrey and I discussed that afternoon was not revenge in the sense of harm. I don't want to harm anyone. I want to be accurate. I want the things I've built to mean what I intend them to mean, and I want them to go where I decide they go. And I don't want anyone to assume anything about who I am or what I have or what I'll do with it. I restructured 3 things that day. First, a foundation. I'd been thinking about it for years without doing it. I wanted to create something for women in transitions, leaving difficult marriages, aging out of the system, starting over past 50. I've known enough of them. I was almost one of them. The foundation would be funded by the income from 2 of the Hamilton properties in perpetuity with a board of trustees I selected. Second, I donated the Kingston property outright to a housing co-op that had been trying to acquire it for 2 years. I'd been meaning to do it and hadn't gotten around to the paperwork. Geoffrey got around to it. Third, and this is the one Geoffrey raised his eyebrow about, I had a letter drafted, not to anyone in the family. To no one, just a letter, a clear and complete account of what I own and what I've done with it and why, to be kept with my will, to be read after. I didn't want the satisfaction of telling them, that's not what this was. I didn't want to watch their faces change. I needed the truth to exist somewhere, documented with my name on it. I needed the record to be accurate. That felt like enough. I should tell you about the box of letters because that's actually the part of this story that matters most, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. My daughter came to my house the following Thursday evening. We sat in my kitchen, which is where we always sit, and I made us peppermint tea because neither of us drink much anymore, and she had the box with her. She brought it from home, carried it in her bag. She set it on the table between us. I read some of them on the train, she said. Her voice was careful, the way her voice gets when she's trying not to cry. Which ones? My 8th birthday. She laughed a little. You wrote about how I refused to eat anything but cheese and crackers for 3 months, and you were worried I was going to get scurvy. You were, I said, and my 23rd. She stopped. The one where you said that being my mother was the thing you were most proud of. Not the work you'd done or the house you'd bought or any of it. Me. I meant it. I know you did. She wrapped her hands around her mug. Mom, I want to ask you something and I need you to be honest. All right. What did you do this week? With Geoffrey. I looked at her for a moment. I made sure everything is in order, I said. It should have been in order a long time ago. It is now. Did you change anything about you are taken care of? I said. That is not what this was about. She nodded. She was quiet for a moment. I should have said something at the table, she said. Yes. He should have said something. Yes. It's been hard sometimes to know how to. She stopped. Started again. I think I've been trying to keep the peace, and I think I've been doing it at the expense of things that matter. I think that might be right, I said, and I think you're the only one who can decide what to do about it. She looked at the box. I'm going to read every letter, she said. I know you are. And then I'm going to have a conversation with my husband. Good, I said. We sat there for a while longer. I refilled the kettle. We talked about other things, her job, a neighborhood cat that had been coming to my garden, the Heritage Tomato Man, and his information about brandy wines. Eventually, she put on her coat and picked up the box, and at the front door she hugged me for a long time. longer than usual. After she left, I stood in my front hall and I listened to the house. 27 years I have lived in this house. I painted every room myself, twice. There's a mark on the doorframe of the back bedroom where I measured my daughter's height every year until she left for university. The kitchen window looks out at a maple tree that goes the most extraordinary color in October. I know exactly what this house is worth. I know exactly what everything is worth. But the thing she said, his mother at that table, the thing she meant when she said it was that I was worth nothing. That what I had made and carried and held on to had no value because it didn't look valuable to her. That my letters and their careful envelopes were a small and quaint thing from a small and quaint person. And I thought about my mother, counting quarters on the kitchen table in Sudbury, singing while she worked. A thing she carried that nobody saw. I am her daughter. I always have been. I went to bed at 10 and slept better than I had in months. It's been 7 months since that dinner. My daughter and her husband had, as she said they would, a conversation. I don't know the details, and I don't need to. What I know is that she calls more now, and when she calls, she sounds more like herself. And last month, she came over on a Sunday, and we drove out to the Niagara Escarpment and walked for 3 hours, and she told me some things she'd been holding on to for a while. I told her some things, too, about the properties, about what I'd built. Not to surprise her, not to make a point, just because she's my daughter and she should know who I am. She was quiet for a long time after I told her. Then she said, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I didn't want it to change anything," I said. She thought about that. "Does it?" she asked. "Does it what?" "Change anything. For you. Knowing that you have it." I thought about that. About the first house and the walls I touched. About my mother. About Geoffrey in the parking lot. "No," I said. "I'm still the same person who woke up every day and did the work. The number doesn't change that." She nodded. We kept walking. The escarpment was beautiful that day, the kind of gray-green light you only get in Ontario in April when everything is on the edge of something. I have not heard from my son-in-law's mother since the anniversary dinner. I don't imagine I will. That particular chapter seems to have closed quietly, the way chapters do when the people involved have nothing more to say to each other. She still doesn't know. I have thought about whether she ever will, and I've decided it doesn't matter. The point was never for her to know. The point was for the truth to be true. For my name to be on things that last, for the work I did to go where it deserves to go. You don't live 63 years and learn nothing. You learn that the people who underestimate you will keep doing it, and fighting them is a waste of your time. You learn that the satisfaction of proving a point to someone who isn't listening is no satisfaction at all. You learn that the best revenge isn't making sure they find out. It's knowing yourself, exactly who you are, and building something with it quietly that will outlast the dinner conversation where someone decided you weren't worth knowing. My daughter has the box of letters. She keeps it on her nightstand, she told me. She reads one when she needs to. That, I think, is the thing I made that matters most. Everything else is just arithmetic. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually costs to underestimate someone. Not in a dramatic sense. Not the way it plays out in movies, where the moment of reckoning comes with music and a confrontation and everyone in the room understands exactly what happened. Real life isn't like that. Real life is a September dinner in Oakville where a woman leans across a table and says something small and dismissive, and then the evening continues and the dessert gets eaten and nobody says a word. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known because she never thought to look, was that I had been building something for 20 years, quietly, without anyone's permission or approval or awareness. 11 properties, a portfolio managed carefully, added to slowly, maintained with the kind of attention most people reserve for things they're proud of. I was proud of it. I just didn't talk about it because the people in my life didn't need to know, and because I've never believed that the value of a thing depends on how many people are aware of it. That's the first lesson, I think. If there is one, what you build in silence is still real. The absence of an audience doesn't diminish the work. When I sat in Geoffrey's parking lot the morning after that dinner, what I was processing wasn't rage. I want to be clear about that. It was something quieter, a kind of clarity. She had looked at me, at my coat, my shoes, my wooden box wrapped in brown paper, and she had decided, in the way that some people do, that she already knew everything worth knowing. And my son-in-law had sat there and let it happen, which told me something about what my daughter's life had looked like in that house in ways she'd never felt she could tell me. That's the second thing. The people who stay silent when someone is dismissed are making a choice. It might not feel like a choice in the moment. It might feel like keeping the peace or not making a scene or just getting through the evening. But it is a choice, and it has consequences. And the consequences accumulate quietly until one day they're very hard to ignore. My daughter read those letters, all 41 of them, and then she had a conversation with her husband that was, by her account, long overdue. I don't know the details, and I don't need to. What I know is that she called me more after that she sounded more like herself, that we walked for 3 hours along the escarpment in April, and she told me things she'd been carrying for a long time. That's the thing I want to say about resilience, because I think it gets misunderstood. People talk about resilience like it's armor, like it means not being hurt. It doesn't. It means being hurt and continuing anyway. It means sitting in a parking lot after a hard night and deciding that the right response is not to perform your pain for people who wouldn't understand it, but to go upstairs and make the records accurate, and then go home and make tea and sleep. You don't get to 63 years without accumulating a clear sense of what lasts and what doesn't. What lasts is what you build with your hands and your attention and your judgment over a long period of time, unglamorously, without anyone watching. What doesn't last is the opinion of someone who decided in the first 30 seconds of meeting you who you were and never once reconsidered. She still doesn't know. I genuinely don't think she ever will. And I've made my peace with that, because it was never about her knowing. It was about me knowing. It was about making sure that the truth of what I'd done with my life was documented somewhere, attached to my name, directed toward things that mattered. The foundation. The co-op. The letters on my daughter's nightstand. Everything else is just arithmetic.